Good morning and welcome to Hacking HR's panel of experts speaking about mindful meetings this morning, transforming workplace interactions for better decision making and collaboration. Good morning, I'm Lauren Lefkowitz. I am your panel moderator. I'm so excited to be in this room with all of these people who will join us in a moment. If you don't know me, I am an executive coach with 20 years of prior HR experience in corporate, nonprofit, and retail environments. And I work with workaholics and people pleasers, which a lot of us in HR are, to help us figure out why we keep saying things are fine when they aren't. So without further pause, I will welcome our panelists to the stage. Amazing. Welcome, panelists. I am so happy to be here with you. I love this topic because it comes in so counter to how we can get in HR with all the doing, and getting things done and being finished with things so we can move to other things. So mindfulness is such an interesting topic to bring into an HR audience. Before we dive into some questions and answers and panel discussions, I'd love to have you each introduce yourself, and let's just go in the order we are on the screen from me and over and top to bottom. And if you could introduce yourself. Sorry, my computer paused itself. If you could introduce yourself, tell us where you work, what your HR experience is, and why you're here, why this topic.
Okay, guess I'll go first. Hello, everybody. My name is Anuja, and I'm joining you from Arlington, Virginia, which is very close to the nation's capital. It's raining out here. I can't wait for spring and cherry blossoms. I have been a part of the learning and development, the HR side of the world, for about 20 years now. And meetings are something I love and hate equally. So I think this is a great discussion to talk about how can we make these really effective and do things to achieve goals rather than just for the sake of teamwork and collaboration. So I'm a Hogan and Strengths coach. I manage leadership development, change management, and executive coaching at Metro. And I'm thrilled to be here today with everyone. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Roxana Flores, most recently with The Messenger, a digital news organization. I've spent most of my career in the media landscape. Every one of us is afraid to look at the calendar because there's a meeting and after a meeting after a meeting that bleeds into the next meeting. And a lot of those meetings result in more meetings because we just don't know how to communicate. So this topic is incredibly important, I think, for all of us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Evelyn Reed. I've been coming in from Philadelphia and have over 15 years of overall HR experience. I'm currently sitting as the Senior HR Director for Jason Strategic Merchandising, and I also do private work for small businesses and startups under my moniker HR John. And this topic for me is important because I equate workplace interactions as how it affects employee engagement and the overall employee experience. And so for me, I'm always looking to improve and make the workplace interactions positive. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Hi, really excited to be here. I am recovering from a flu bug, so a little stuffed up, but Mindy Honku calling in from Austin, Texas. And I have over 20 years of HR practitioner and leadership experience. I started Agile in HR as a fractional HR services in 2022. So I get the great opportunity to work with small, medium businesses at a fraction of the time and cost to provide that strategic guidance. And we need to crack the code on meetings. I think meetings ever since I joined the workplace from college have just been a constant frustration. And some workplaces I've been have done it better than others. But it's something that I feel has actually gotten worse over time than better. So super excited for this conversation.
Amazing. Thank you all for being here. And panelists, as I ask questions, we're going to ask the audience to bring their comments in so that we can bring that into the discussion. There are 5 of us on the screen, but hundreds in our audience. So we want to be as inclusive as possible. And panelists, when you're ready to talk, just come off of mute. Pay attention to when your other panelists are coming off of mute. We will interrupt each other at some point, and be kind about it. And everybody will have a chance to answer every question. So let's get started with just some like baseline foundational definitions. What is a meeting versus a mindful meeting? What does the word mindful add? Yeah, just go ahead and come off mute.
I think,
yeah.
So
I think a meeting is, something that we don't really think about. We go in, perhaps we think we have an agenda, but we don't really have a defined agenda. And I think a mindful meeting is one where we know the timing, the key players that should be in the meeting, the point of this meeting, what we expect to, for each one of us to have to do, the takeaway of the meeting, and for there to be clarity around that. I think that's probably the difference between just the meeting on your calendar versus knowing exactly what we're looking to accomplish in this meeting.
I love that, Roxanne.
I would. Oh no, go ahead, Mindy. I just was going to concur with her.
I know, we're
agree
just like, yeah,
wholeheartedly.
dude, resonated. Yeah. I think to take that to the next level, it's about before you hit the schedule meeting, it's about really getting clear on those things. It's almost like project managing your meetings. It's key stakeholder management. What are we trying to accomplish? If you think about meeting and getting these people together, what is that outcome that you hope to walk away from that meeting even before you schedule it? And what is needed to drive to that outcome? And is there really a need for these people to all get together and to collaborate? Or is it really just a status update and you need a thumbs up? Because if you just need someone to just give a thumbs up, maybe it's a quick Loom video with a brief document. It's really thinking about, what am I trying to accomplish? And is a meeting the best way to accomplish that?
I concur. And just to add on to that, I think the operative word also here with mindful is synonymous with respecting others' time. And I think that's what makes a mindful meeting different from just a regular meeting, to piggyback and tie up with both Roxanne and Mindy has stated.
I completely agree with what everyone said. And the way I look at mindful meetings is our minds are so full all the time where we are rushing around on our projects and meetings. This is a time in a mindful meeting to just pause. So it brings a lot of peace and calm when you are in the meeting. You're actually focused and paying attention. And I think the added element of emotional intelligence. We're typically just doing things in meetings, saying things, getting work done. But can we pause and listen to each other and take things back? You may not agree with everything, but really enjoy the expertise, the diversity in the room, and walk out with clear action goals.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we all here, I think, have a great sense of how logistically a meeting can go so that we get to a place, we have a point, we have a reason for being there, there's an agenda, all of that kind of stuff. And also, I heard a little bit coming in about how we don't do that. We dive into meetings. Could this have been, as somebody said Kimberly said in the comments, another meeting that could have been an email, right? Do we just need a thumbs up? Do we just need a paper meeting, right? And so I think a lot of what happens is that doing. So if you're planning a meeting, I'd love for us to talk about planning a meeting, and I'd love for us to talk then about attending a meeting and being a good participant. But if we're planning a meeting from the standpoint of holistic health, wellness, and well-being at work, before we even get into the doing, how do we take care of ourselves and of meeting participants if we are planning a meeting?
So that's such a great question. One of the things that's a big pet peeve of mine is that, we all share a calendar corporately, and that if people see 15 minutes available in your calendar, they're going to squeeze themselves in there. And I think we should start with respect, right? If we see a calendar is red, we should probably not take those 15 minutes unless it's absolutely an emergency, in which case you're probably not scheduling a meeting, but calling the person directly. I think there's that. I think there needs to be the person organizing the meeting is the person that sort of has to have that control, if you will, and really think about who needs to be in the meeting. So many times we're dealing with so many different personalities, and we invite people because we think of how they might feel excluded if they're not in the meeting. And I think we need to create an environment of we're only involving the people that need to be there, because we need decision makers. This is not about who the favorites are, but really just about what we need to accomplish and make sure that when you're planning this meeting, that everyone who might have a stake in the end result needs to be a participant. So really being thoughtful about that list. And then again, always looking at a calendar and ensuring that the calendar works for most people. And we know sometimes it doesn't, and really sort of reevaluating whether it must be at this day and this time, and really trying to find something that everyone present in the meeting isn't worried about all the other things that they could be doing, should be doing, or what they're missing, and really be participating in this meeting.
I would concur with that. One of the things I would add as a takeaway or a to-do that I started doing is that what I add is a line item that says stakeholders, and identify who they are. And then I always add the caveat: if you're not the stakeholder for this meeting, please forward to that said stakeholder, and let whoever the agenda meeting the planner know who that person is, so then they can update their contact list, right? Because I think too often in businesses and corporations, we get our picks up from those particular business units, and so we always go to them, but they may not necessarily be the person necessary for that meeting. So you may start with them, but then they can forward it to Sally Sue, and you'd be like, hey, Sally's more the person for this meeting, and so I'm going to decline and let Sally accept. And so that helps to give the attendees the option and the flexibility to pass it along and not feel like they're pigeonholed into that meeting. And I think the other thing is adding expectations into the meeting invite, and that could be what the agenda is. If you want video, putting that in the meeting agenda, not just making an assumption that video should be on. If you require active participation, what that expectation may or may not be for that meeting. I think too often people operate on assumptions, which cause conflict, right? And so if we take away the assumptions and be very clear about what that meeting's expectations and agendas are, that will help make this meeting a lot more mindful for the participants within.
I love that. I really think it's all about preparing and making expectations clear so that people don't come in with their own assumptions. So, for example, simple things like we all have limited attention spans. So whenever there is a transition in the meeting, it's best to say, hey, we're moving on to the next topic. Or, hey, something's not directly related, and can we put that in the parking lot? Or does this require an entirely new meeting, right? Simple things. And I think the facilitator or the host plays a very important role in doing this, whether it is sharing the agenda at the beginning of the meeting or even before the meeting so that people can show up prepared. If there's a lot of tension in the room, if emotions are running high, do we need a break for people to refocus, energize? Asking people to bring their water bottles, right? If they need a drink in the room and if you're not providing food. But just taking care of simple elements like that. Our physical sensations create our emotions. So if you're not comfortable in your chair, if the lighting is not right, or if it's just too hot or cold in the room, if you're in a room, right, with everyone, how can you pay attention to these tiny things, which should be common sense, but we all know common sense is not so common. So just being mindful in that sense and allowing people to bring their true selves and just participate wholeheartedly in the decision and discussion. I think that is the value of mindful meetings.
Okay, everyone's been taking off all my. Okay, so I'm check. Okay, so one more thing that I have that has it, just to to close out this question is I think that when going back to kind of key stakeholder management, in order to get to all these outcomes, that all these great outcomes, it's also about, do you actually know the people? Do you know these key stakeholders? Do you know, like, do they prefer to have a pre-read? Is someone a little bit more quiet? And like, how do we create the team norms of the people that are going to be in this meeting? Is this the first time that these people are together? So do we have the opportunity to create space then, if it is the first time, for people to get to know each other? What's a trust level of this group of people? Is there, or if this group has been meeting for a while and there has been some unhealthy meetings starting to occur, really being, as the owner of the meeting, owning that team health. Have we had one-off conversations to check in with people that maybe are showing up with less energy, or maybe have a tone that they didn't have in the prior meetings, and being able to take aside and be able to really check in and see what is going on? I think that's really all about, how do we maintain and build trust, but we have to also have the deeper understanding of who are the humans that are coming into this meeting. How do they prefer to come in? So we know what temperature they like. Does someone is sensitive to light? And we need to be able to have the ability to dim lights, to be able to have that people feel like it's a safe place for them to come into. So that's just the last thing I would add.
And I want to make sure I add in, someone put it in the chat, scribe and note taking. That is critical in a mindful meeting, because I think too often we have meetings and then the takeaways get missed. And so making sure that we're identifying early on in the meeting, and it shouldn't be the facilitator, because they're busy facilitating the meeting, right? So someone else should be taking the notes or scribing for this, so that there's tangible action items and everyone's clear on what was discussed and what was the takeaways and what are next steps. So I want to make sure we highlight that comment, because I truly believe that's a great takeaway to make a meeting more mindful.
And I love that, and being able to rotate that each meeting, especially if it's a reoccurring meeting with a team people, so that everyone has the ability to interact at an equal level.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
thinking taking minutes is anybody's least favorite activity. And I think we can leverage artificial intelligence, right, for taking notes, or maybe optimizing the meeting, giving some facts around what are the engagement dynamics like, what are the improvement ideas. So I think we can definitely leverage AI for that.
All really, really good tips. Question for the panel, just a hand raise. Have you ever been invited to a meeting that you could not find a discernible reason you were invited to it? Yeah. So, there's a lot of conversation so far in the stakeholder piece, right? And HR people, we have such a strange combination of reputations. And one of the things that we have a reputation for is being awesome in a meeting. We move people along. We tell people to put it in the parking lot, right? We seem to be the only ones who know that parking lots exist. And often, and this has happened throughout my career, we're invited into the meeting because we're good at a thing. And so we're invited into the meeting because we're good mediators, we're good decision makers, we're good at cross collaboration kinds of things. And also, as HR professionals, because we get pulled in so many directions, we don't have the time or space for all of those things. So in your practice as an HR professional, how have you managed to being invited to things that you don't necessarily belong in?
For me, I leverage my team. So first, I leverage having the seat at the table and deciding on, is that a seat that I personally need or someone on my team needs? And being able to discern what needs to get divvied out. I'm a firm believer in declining meetings. My organization knows I'm good for that. If it does not serve my, a purpose for our team or our function, or my calendar just can't support it, for various reasons, I have no problem declining and responding, hey, would love to join. However, that time doesn't work for me. Can we find another time, or send me the meeting notes? And I think that's come from having healthy boundaries set in place, not just for myself, but I encourage that with my team as well, to trickle down so that they continue to have seats at the table, but that they're being mindful of their own expectations and responsibilities.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also about, if you are surprised by why am I invited to this meeting, it's having a conversation with the person that invited me of what's the why. Because often, going back, kind of, Lauren, what I was hearing that maybe that wasn't 100% being said in there is HR has some amazing skills around facilitating and being able to help kind of drive through to maintain focus of what is the outcome. If we're starting to derail, let's keep everyone. Are we hearing from everyone? So if a manager is inviting us, we stop to ask them why, and they're like, if it truly is like our meetings are really unhealthy, there's some toxicity here, I need some help to understand. Well, us just attending that meeting, we may be missing an opportunity actually to coach this manager or the organizer on how to run a meeting. And maybe it's that they don't know. And so maybe it is we need to delegate from our team someone else who's really great at meetings to come shadow. Like if we've like kind of trained, if that person feels comfortable trying it out, well, let's like have someone come and see how are they doing, how are they trying out, so they can get that feedback and be able to see, are they able to implement those change in behaviors to drive towards a healthy outcome in the meeting. Like we have the opportunity to actually understand what is the problem and be able to supply that person with the skills and the know-how and the support to be able to do those things on their own.
What I've seen typically is who's in the meeting is also an important part that we look at, right? Power dynamics plays an important role. So if you see that there are important or senior level people invited to a meeting, we typically feel compelled to go in, even if we don't know what our role is going to be in the meeting. I'm notorious for messaging people before meetings and saying, hey, what is this meeting about? And what do you want me to do in that meeting, right? Am I just supposed to be somebody who's listening or observing things for a particular reason? Or do you want me to contribute at any section, and for how many minutes? Because our meetings tend to just get extended, people are rambling, and you lose focus. So I think that is one of the bigger questions for me. Who's in the meeting? If there are 20 people in the meeting, what are the roles that we are playing? Do we all need to be there? And can something be a one-on-one conversation or just a document? I'm a big supporter of, can that meeting be just be an email, or can it just be a chat message on Slack or Teams, right? Because not everything needs to be a meeting, and not all meetings need to be mindful. So I think, again, going back to the questions about the purpose, who's in there, and what we want to accomplish is a big one when we look at any kind of meeting.
When we first started this conversation, there was somebody at the beginning of the chat who said meetings have gotten so much worse since COVID. What do you think has led to the worsening of meetings? And how do we back out of that as HR professionals, as leaders, as strategists? How do we help the organizations that we work with figure out how to roll back to the before times in the respective things that did actually work?
I would say for me, I think a part of that, the explosion of meetings was pulse checks, right? A lot of organizations went from being in office to completely remote. And you had a lot of managers who just didn't feel comfortable that people were working in the way to keep, a pulse check when that was a schedule a meeting, right? And I think for, as we, roll back that, some of that is the healthy conversations I'm having is, if you either trust this person to do the job you hire them to do, or you don't. And if you don't, that's a performance conversation we need to have. Otherwise, how can you expect them to get work done if they're in constant meetings? I said, use yourself an example, like how productive are you if there's constant meetings on your calendar? And so I think as HR professionals, our job is to kind of level set with management in that regards, and identify what the true issue is and the true need for all these meetings, and then redirect to earlier points of, is this a email or is this a meeting worthy, right? And if it's meeting worthy, keep in mind that's taking them away from productivity, and productivity then means we're not meeting goals, and if we're not meeting goals, that's another conversation. So I think bringing them back to the real reasons why we're here, and how we can utilize the workforce that we have more effectively.
Yes, and I would add that we did so much. People were accustomed to water cooler talk and just seeing each other in the office, and all of these spontaneous, natural discussions occurring. And I know at my organizations, we did so much around, we've got to change how we keep connection, how we keep culture, how we ensure people are okay. And yes, of course, that they are also being productive. And I think we did so much of that managers just didn't really know how to be in touch with their organizations, with their teams that they were normally running into, getting water or coffee. So I think it's to add to that, yes, you had a tranche of managers that were like, I can't see them, so they must not be working. And then you've had the other ones that are, how do I keep this connection? And I found particularly my extroverted types really needed that. They couldn't see them. They needed the connection because they gained their energy, right, from other people. And so that became, let's just talk 17 times a day. And really, again, it was about education. It was about, hey, you could see who's constantly in a meeting and who isn't, and just training around what is the point of the meeting? What is an effective meeting? We don't want people, because they're home, to start their workday at the end of the workday because they couldn't get to all the things, right? And which so many people did, which contributed to burnout. So I think it was a combination of, yes, the lack of trust. And then there was also I get my energy from my team and I don't see them and I need this. It was a combo. And for me, for the places that I led people in, it was around just training and constant refreshers around, what is the appropriate amount of time.
I also saw too the tools that we used when we were majority in the office around a whiteboard or, with the Post-it notes, just having something to centrally focus and be able to work together on. Being able to replace that with the digital tools. Not everyone, it took time to learn how to use like a Miro board or use some of these whiteboard tools. And they've gotten better, but they're not like great. and that just took time for people. And I don't think we're still really good at those virtual tools.
Yeah. There's a great comment in the chat from Kathy Davis who says, for remote employees, meetings can be the only time people feel connected. How do you suggest creating connections for remote employees while lessening meetings?
I think that Roxanne kind of expounded upon that a lot, in that the human piece of connections were missing with that. And so I know one of the things we implemented were what we call team huddles. They were completely voluntary. And it was, once a month where you just could pop in and we could chit chat, whether it's about life, whether it was just us eating lunch. It was just our time to just non-productive work stuff and just kind of connect. And again, completely voluntary. You had things to do, of course, you wouldn't jump in. But if you had the time, you could jump in. And then we started that within our teams, and we noticed that more teams wanted something similar. So we did more of a global one and kind of expanded upon it. Again, allowing people to jump in and off, and made it completely voluntary. And we found that to be very much helpful. And then the other thing I encourage my managers to do is to implement regular check-ins. I think too often they were just having to, Roxanne's one, the water cooler check-ins here and there. So because they were so infrequent, but frequently, they didn't feel the need to do regular, scheduled check-ins. And so now it's like, hey, if you need those touch points, schedule them so that people can plan appropriately and have those updates readily available for you to do those touch-ins.
I've worked with a couple of great organizations, and they offer collaboration spaces or common overlap areas where people can actually meet and create new connections, new conversations. So I think that is something that, especially when people are asked to return to work, that is something that can be a very, very important thing to consider. But for remote employees, what we need to consider is we have teams that are working in different time zones, and asking them to jump on a call probably later in the evening, if somebody's at home at 10 p.m. in India, and you asking them to join for a team building session in the afternoon in Virginia, is totally unfair. They're not in the right space. You ask them to jump on camera, that may not be possible, right? So again, going back to what are an individual's needs and preferences, what's possible for them. Collaboration can also happen asynchronously. There could be different tools that we use, Kudo board, for example, where we're able to put in our notes, thoughts, compliments for somebody on an occasion at different times at our own schedule, rather than forcing somebody to connect at one time when it may not work for them. I think what is also important is looking at where do we really need to collaborate, right? And I saw in the comments some interesting pieces around the managers want to micromanage, they want to keep their eyes on you, and that's why they're doing this. But if we have a well-drafted document that highlights processes, decision-making, any other ideas that people have, and they're able to annotate, add their comments, I think everybody takes on the role of being a creator and collaborator at their own time without reaching out to people for specific questions that may already be addressed on that document. So I just think using some of those tools, making information public, using SharePoints and Drives to do that is more helpful than asking people to jump on a call and then have a team building exercise or just answer basic questions.
It's funny when I hear terms like team building or icebreaker or things like that, I shudder, right? And I actually like those kinds of activities, but the connotation that those words have can be really daunting. You can have somebody who's stressing about figuring out their fun fact before they even get on the call. So when we're talking about sort of this balance of, especially if you don't have a water cooler spot, if you're remote, if you're in multiple offices, whatever it is, how do you find that balance of interaction versus getting the work done, right? Not feeling like, okay, court is in session, and also not feeling like you're going to have to pass a potato around the room and share different ideas.
I think Evelyn mentioned this, and I think it is important for managers to connect with their teams, and having those regular, but not necessarily, super frequent touch-ins, just to see what are we doing, how are we moving things along, what do you need from me, how can I be of service, those just normal check-ins. There shouldn't be a case where a manager is not talking to their employees for months. It just shouldn't be the case. Your team should be your number one responsibility. I mean, I always have taken the position that if my team is okay, I have no worries in the world, because I know that they have everything they need to get things done, right? And so it's just having those regular check-ins to say, how are you? What are you working on? What can I do for you? Or this is what I need, or this is the direction I need us to go into, right? Just regular, but not, massively invasive touch-based meetings.
I think Lauren.
And I would definitely,
sorry, Evelyn.
No, I was just going to say, I would definitely add to that is listening to your team, right? And a lot of times we set the cadence and just be done with it. Use myself as an example. When I first started, like we had biweekly check-ins and it was like, this is that. And then I started doing more collaborative meetings. And one of the asks I is how productive are these biweekly meetings? Do you get, do you feel they're of value? And if not, what do you feel would be a better value? And listening to my team, we switched them to quarterly check-ins. And then that allows them time and space back on their calendar. And then that allows me to still know, like, at least I know on a quarterly basis, I get these updates from them. And here's the format that I can look forward to and look back on. But that took me listening to my team. Right here, I thought I was doing the right thing for them, and whole time they didn't like it, right? And not just simply they didn't want the time to check in, but it wasn't productive for them or a value add as I thought it was. And so I think a lot of times managers really need to listen to their teams as it goes and understand this can be fluid and this can be changed, and it's okay to pivot and adjust throughout the course.
I think, Lauren, what you mentioned earlier was about the balance, right? What are the things that actually need collaboration and checking in versus independent work where you just have to focus on your own projects and deliverables? Again, as managers, of course, it's important for you to check in with your team, see where they need help, but recurring meetings tend to lose value over time. So figuring out if we really need recurring meetings or can they more be, at a certain collaboration time, let's say out of your 8 hours a day, you have clear blocks of time for collaboration and you're available for people to ping you, interrupt what you're doing because you are available. Those are your office hours. But the remaining 5 hours are for your core focus work where you can actually focus on your projects without being interrupted. I was looking at some research and numbers the other day. It says for a 30-minute meeting, we actually end up spending 58 minutes either preparing for the meeting or just getting back to a flow state on another activity because you've been distracted and now you need to kind of refocus, right? And also, when you're multitasking, you're doing things 20% worse. So how can you make sure that without context switching and just through pure focus, you have a block of time where you collaborate with people, and then the rest of the time, you're doing your independent work and your own goals and objectives?
I love that. I mean, I think there's like so many things that you could unpack in there. And I know we haven't started talking about attending meetings, but I think another thing that's gotten worse is like, are we actually present in the meeting and listening versus contact switching and trying to do multiple things while we're in the meeting? Because we're actually not taking in or listening or participating if we are looking at our phone or our computer off to the side, or in a virtual land, the monitors that we have and all that surround us. And the importance of being able to have team health and the checking in, as Evelyn was saying with her team, like the things that are needed are trust. Like, do we have like trust on this team for employees to actually feel like they can tell you and is that you're listening to the actual truth? Because if there is no trust, they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. The other thing is around how you set really clear expectations for success and outcomes for your team so that your team understands what is needed to be able together as one team to get to those outcomes so that they can understand, do we need to meet or not meet? So, in some ways, it's also as you as a manager, have you set up a space in which you've allowed yourself to kind of almost step back to allow your team to breathe and be able to inform how you guide them, that you actually are guiding them versus being the one controlling them.
So Mindy, you just mentioned it, and it's come up a little bit in the chat. How do we, as active participants in a meeting, be active participants and not get distracted by task switching, by noises? I've got construction above me in my condo building, and fortunately, every time I've unmuted, they've stopped sawing. I don't know how that's happened, but we have distractions. The dishwasher goes off, the dog needs something, all of that kind of stuff. How do you limit distractions, whether you're at home, whether you're hybrid and you've got some people at home and some people in an office together, or whether you're in the office? How do you help people as a meeting leader or even as an attendee be present?
I think it's a matter of, it's part of the culture. I think there's an education around, when we're saying what we're saying, do we all understand the same thing? I think for me particularly, it's a matter of respect, right? If I am at your meeting or you are at my meeting, I am giving you my undivided attention. Now, let's face it, sometimes somebody pops into an office and says something's going on and it's critical, but those things happen less often. And I know for myself, if I'm in a meeting, I put my phone on do not disturb. Because someone mentioned it earlier, our attention spans, because of so much input, are so limited. I really try to focus in on what's happening, and I engage. By engaging, I make sure that I'm sort of in it, and I hold myself accountable to that, to make sure that I'm giving you the time and the respect. And by the way, I find that when I am wholly focused, those meetings tend not to run on because we're accomplishing what we set out because we're there, present, listening and responding, and not, taking it in another direction or saying, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, because we weren't fully engaged. That's what works for me.
I think as a meeting facilitator, if we're able to set those expectations right at the beginning, to say, hey, we're here for a limited time, we have a clear agenda and goal, so let's all keep our devices muted. And then begin with a mindfulness or a grounding exercise. I found that hugely useful in a lot of meetings where we just take a few minutes, and you don't really have to do meditation, right? That's the buzzword where everybody's meditating. We can just be silent. Just breathe. Don't even deep breathe. Just breathe. Just be here. Connect with your senses. See what you're feeling in the room. And then, of course, launch into the discussion, making sure that everybody is paying attention. They're contributing where they need to. They're not forced to contribute, because that, again, becomes a power dynamic. And there is no role or title that we are favoring in the meeting. So really, back to what you said, right? It's about respect. It's about equality, encouraging diverse opinions. I saw in the comments, psychological safety, active listening, absolutely. And you do not need to agree with everything, but trying to understand where they're coming from. What are their needs? What are their challenges? And then working on those collaboratively, using our strengths, using our experience, and trying to achieve those goals and decisions.
Anuja, you just said something that I think is so important. I always start a meeting with I think it's great, the moment of silence. I start sort of saying, hey, let's assume good intent so that people really feel like they can say, we've become such a polarizing cancel culture that even people with good intent are afraid to say something in a meeting because of the repercussions or that they might be canceled. And I always start a meeting saying, these are the points, this is what we're looking to cover, this is what we're looking to accomplish. Let's respect each other and let's assume good intent. And that seems to kind of shift the air, if you will, in the meetings. And more so than ever, I feel like I've had to do that at the top of the meeting. Let's assume good intent, because everybody's so fiery these days.
Great points. And I think Anuja and Roxana, you just brought up some of the roadblocks that we run into as we're trying to create transformation and create an environment where meetings are more effective, collaboration is more effective. So when you look around and you see some of these repeating cycles of everybody's invited to every meeting, people are, facing this way and typing away while you're on a Zoom with them, or you're in a meeting with somebody and they've got one hand on their phone and the other hand on their laptop keyboard. How do you, first of all, recognize these roadblocks as roadblocks? Because I think we get a little bit numb to them. But how do you recognize them? And then how do you respectfully overcome the things that block us from positive moves?
I know for me, I'm a firm believer of calling things out when it happens. I think too often people let things linger, and then by the time they address them, people are shocked by them, right? Because they've been going on for so long that it's like, oh, I didn't realize, so I'm a firm believer when it happens, it's okay to, alert the person. And I love what Anaja said about good intent. I use lead with positive intent, same thing, but it's like, you go in with positive intentions, and the outcome to me will always be the same, whether, right, wrong, or indifferent. But at least, you went from a genuine place. And I'm a firm believer you start with that person individually first, not to put them on Front Street. A private message is always like, because sometimes they may not be aware, right? Sometimes they're doing so much that they probably forgot their camera was on while they're facing, and so a quick message of like, hey, not sure your camera's on, but we see your back. Or, hey, I see, maybe you need to turn your volume on mute because we can hear your back, and sometimes people appreciate just that, private message or just that moment of feedback, because we're all humans. We make mistakes. I know for me, my biggest one is I'm always on mute. So like they love to say, you're on mute. And it's like, oh, thank you. Because I'm human, right? I forgot. And so it's okay to, be able to call it out. And I think the other piece of that is
being able to receive it and not feel personally attacked, and not to think everything someone says is a personal attack. Maybe it's just for your benefit. And if you do feel personally attacked, it's okay to say, you know, I'm not ready to receive this at this moment, but thank you. I'll circle back with you, and keep it moving until you're ready to digest it.
I really like that, Evelyn. I think mindful meetings are hard, Lauren, and we don't have to shoot for the stars. I think using one technique or building one step at a time is helpful. A simple question like just checking with everyone to say, hey, how mindful are you feeling right now? How present are you right now? Is there something urgent on your mind that needs to be resolved before you can participate fully in this meeting? And I think that level of honesty or transparency really helps, where people feel comfortable in sharing their challenges. They're able to say, hey, you know, there's something, I just need to work on it for 5 minutes and I'll be back with you 100%. And I think that's a fair ask, because it's much better to allow them those 5 minutes and get back completely than to destroy the rest of the meeting with either attention or, you know, just feeling rebuked about certain feedback, like Evelyn said, to just say, it's okay, we trust each other, we're open, we're here to support each other. And how can we do that with respect and openness?
I often start a meeting like what everyone was saying, but how I get to that is, how are we coming into this session? Before we jump in, obviously it depends on, you know, is this a new team, or, you know, or do we have established relationships? We obviously want to take that all into mind. I think it's also about how, you know, if this is an intact team, do we have a set of team norms? Like, do we understand what our own behaviors are? Are we doing a regular retrospective of, you know, what gets in the way of our team having healthy meetings? And then being able to identify and being able to check in, like, let's say every quarter, okay, these are our barriers to success in team. And so as a team, we agree we're going to keep these front and center. And now it's not just on our manager's responsibility, but we're all leaders. And we all start by leading ourselves by coming into this. And if I mess something up, or if I see something that's getting messed up, we all own accountability to hold each other accountable, to clean it up together, that we're in this together and we're human and we are going to mess it up. There's going to be a day where we're going to mess it up. And what does it look like to clean that up together in a way that's respectful? And so I really love us having those kind of team norms that we are able to agree on, and giving us a space to then call those out. And sometimes it can be fun. I get teams like have a fun time with that. And then being able to look back and are these still serving us? Are these still really the blockers? And I think that goes back to where Evelyn was saying too, when she checks in with her team, is this meeting still even needed?
So somebody put in the comments, on our screen, it shows LinkedIn user, but I can see directly on LinkedIn. It's from Shaniqua. I start off with housekeeping rules such as be present, be on camera, even if you're not looking ready. Show grace if people need the gift of time. Have a conflict periodically and hold them accountable for getting back briefed by a team member. So lots of ideas. When you think about how you set up for a meeting, both as a meeting leader or as an attendee, how can you come in and set the example as an HR leader?
That's a great question. And right now I'm thinking of communication skills and meeting skills and presentation skills, right? All of the laundry list of skills that we all need to develop, no matter what our expertise or level. I think what's important is to offer different ways of interacting and engaging with each other. So whether it is for extroverts or people who enjoy speaking, give them that airtime so they're able to speak, but don't allow them to ramble. So being able to say, okay, right, let's each one of us take a minute to share our views. And then, of course, encourage people to interact on chat, on the whiteboard, other methods, given that we're working in a hybrid world. Also, I think what is important is to make sure that people feel engaged and interested in the conversations that we're having. People will get distracted if the conversation is not relevant. So how can we keep those guardrails in place and ensure meetings are getting implemented, end on time, stick to the topic, and again, make sure that the facilitation is on point?
And I would concur with that. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I know I was having difficulties. I would concur with that. And also, I love the housekeeping rules. I actually like to see those in the meeting invite, right? So that way it level sets when they get the invite, but then to reiterate them again at the start of the meeting. And I think as an HR professional, how we, keep this going is we lead by example, right? If that's what the house rules are, then we show up in those house rules. So that way it kind of level sets with everyone else. Like, oh, I see, like if I want my video on and, that's what's the expectation, I make sure I come in with my video on so that everyone kind of leads by that example. And you'll see people start to trickle in doing the same things as they see leaders following that example. It's one thing to ask someone to do something, but if you don't follow it, then it's kind of a moot point. So I think you have to set the example you want to see. And you have to be intentional about it at every meeting. Anaja brought something up, like, one small thing each meeting builds up to become habit, and so you can build upon that until you look back 3 years later. You're like, wow, we're 3 years ago, meetings weren't running like this. To now they're running a lot more smoother. But that came from each time incrementally building upon the things that you set as standards.
I totally agree with that, Evelyn. I think people, and I always say I'm a little bit of every leader I've ever worked for, or with. And I think it's setting, people are not going to do what you say, they're going to do what they watch you do, right? And when I'm in a meeting, if I put my phone on silent or if I put it on do not disturb and I make it known that that's happening, and I, really focus in on what you're saying, and am actively engaged and giving you respect and being open, and again, assuming good intent, all of those different things, I think your reaction really sort of bleeds into the rest of it. So I agree with that 100%.
And if we talked about like checking in with people before the meeting started, like how are people coming into this meeting? And I think Lauren, I love your name of your coaching business, because often it's like, we're fine. We as leaders, like, are we actually modeling when we're not having a good day? Because I bet that team knows how you're coming into that meeting, because they may have been with you in a prior meeting. And so that also we need to model.
I think 2 reminders that could be made during any meeting, and that may happen multiple times, is 1, cultural awareness. A lot of us speak English. Maybe we don't really speak it fluently. The colloquialisms, the language that we use could be very different. And that's why seeking clarification, ensuring everybody understands what everybody is saying, is important. And at the same time, digesting information before reacting to it. So not allowing people to really react immediately, but write things down, reflect on it, and then share it in a constructive way without being critical or just without shutting somebody down.
Let's talk a little bit about shutting down. I love that. I love that term came up now, because my next question is, how do you handle a derailer? If you've got a general consensus that people want to have mindful meetings and mindful interactions and only invite the right stakeholders to a meeting and respect when somebody says, I don't belong in this meeting, please send me the notes. What do you do as an HR partner to the business in order to help a derailer recognize and make change?
For me, I think it starts with conversations, right? If I'm recognizing there's a pattern with this person, I have no problem scheduling a meeting like, hey, let's talk about, what's going on with this, because sometimes they may not be aware. And so I will level set with them. And then I'm a firm believer, first time is a mistake. Second time is behavioral, right? And so first time they don't know, right? So let's make them aware of it. Let's, have that conversation, go over it. Second time, it's becoming a pattern now because you've continuously done it. So now that's more of a performance conversation that needs to loop in their management. And then we have more deeper conversations on how we can course correct this performance pattern.
Yeah, we all have faced the resident contrarian or the repeated contrarian. And, I think what I do is I acknowledge what they're saying, because to Evelyn's earlier point, I don't want them to feel disrespected or for the situation to devolve any further. I acknowledge what they're saying. I recognize it. And I usually will say, that's an interesting point. I think that we're going to put that in the parking lot, if you will, because that's not for this meeting, but we should definitely talk more. In fact, let's find time to discuss and kind of hopefully that will help. Sometimes it doesn't, and then, you have to use other matters. But generally speaking, if you just acknowledge what someone is saying, people want to be heard. That's what they want. They want to be heard. And if you acknowledge that you've heard them and that you will make time to discuss that particular topic, if it's not relevant to the meeting, you say that and you move on, at least for me.
And I think that's important because if you set out and you have a really clear objective for the meeting and you have like really clear time boxing around your agenda, and what do you need to step through to be able to get to that outcome, that fits in with expectations that you've already set. And so is that in line with the information that's needed to within the time frame that you've put for that conversation to get to the next like time boxed of your meeting? And if it's not, then that's like kind of where that I heard you. That's a really interesting viewpoint. But for the purpose of we need to move forward to the next thing, but let's check in on that like separately to be able to continue to move and to honor and respect the time of the individuals that are there. And also like making sure you're ending the meeting when it's ended.
I think this is where we practice what we preach. So as HR partners and facilitators, we stay open-minded, without judgment, trying to understand why is somebody bringing up a particular point. Do they think it's related to this conversation, or does it impact something that they're working on? I think sometimes we're so quick to say, hey, this doesn't belong to this meeting, put it in the parking lot, but perhaps there's a link that we are not aware of. So asking them to give a short context or what is their purpose of bringing that up before we make a decision. And then the other item, right, about derailing in terms of behaviors. There's so many times in my career where I've heard, this person doesn't come on video, they don't switch on their videos in a meeting, and that is a problem. They're not engaging, they're not interested. And really, it's as simple as some people don't live in a setup where they have their home office, which is free from family and other people at home, especially if they're working remotely or they're joining outside of their work hours. So I think, again, suspending judgment, asking with open mind and with respect about, hey, this is what we're observing. Could you tell us what's happening? And what can we do so that, we're able to fix this, and setting those expectations with the wider team. I think enabling that communication is going to make our meetings and our life beyond our meetings, our typical work, better trust, better openness, just better collaboration if we practice what we preach.
What a lovely comeback to trust and awareness, right? That if somebody has a reason for bringing something up in a meeting, if somebody has a reason for inviting you to a meeting, for a reason for not inviting you to a meeting, working to understand as opposed to working to figure out why you've been offended, right? And so as we're wrapping up, I can't believe we're already coming to the end of this conversation. It's been so robust. But as we're wrapping up, when you think about yourself as an HR professional and when and how you've had to be brave in boundary setting around your attendance, participation in meetings or running of meetings, facilitation of meetings, can you give our audience some good language to use to either advocate for yourself and say, hey, I belong in this meeting and here's why I contribute, or to advocate for yourself out of a set of meetings? Let's hear some language that our audience can take with them.
I usually say something like, if I think I need to be included in a meeting, I'll say, I understand that, a meeting is taking place on these topics, you may not know, but I'm working on X, Y, and Z, which I think would be relevant for the stakeholders in this meeting to hear. Leave it at that. Hopefully that gets me in. If it doesn't, then so be it. And to get out of a meeting, I similarly say, I really want to be of service. I want to ensure that my participation in this meeting adds value. And, I'd like to understand what the topic is. And if the topic isn't relevant for me, I'd say, I think my time would be better served working on whatever it is, right? If it's your CEO, it's a little bit more difficult to navigate that. But even still, I've said, look, I'm working on this time sensitive thing for you, for the organization. And I'm not really sure that my time there would be beneficial to this process or to the stakeholders in the meeting. And I'd like to, miss. And if they give me a reason why they think I should be there, then obviously I will be there. But that's generally what I say. I'm working on this and I'm trying to prioritize these things and don't really think I'd be a value add in this meeting.
I I think that sums it up so nicely, but it's also about it's about seeking to understand. And it's not about just hitting that delete, you're not accepting it or deleting the meeting. It's about having that conversation and walking through that. And I honestly think that by not being in the meeting, who are we giving this space for to be at that table? So as a leader, are we being able to amplify someone else a learning opportunity to be there and prepping them to be successful in that meeting?
Thank you so much. Panel, this has been amazing. This hour went by like that. I want to thank you for being here. We've had 300 to 400 people in our audience today throughout our conversation. Many more will come by and watch. If you're in the audience today, please connect to these panelists. Building your network is a great way to get in touch with people who know what you're going through and help each other learn how to say, let me in or keep me out. Thank you again so much. Have a wonderful day. So appreciate you being here and having this robust conversation.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Appreciate all of you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.